of 2023, when the Morgan family decided to embark on a vacation they would never forget. The Morgans, consisting of Mark, Sarah, and their 2 children, Emily and Ethan, had always been fond of outdoor adventures. This year they opted for a rustic cabin by Hollow Lake, tucked away deep in the woods. Hollow Lake was known for its serene beauty and the tranquility it offered. Surrounded by tall pine trees and bordered by a thick forest, it was the perfect destination for those seeking solace from the hustle and bustle of city life. The Morgans were excited as they arrived at the cabin, their home for the next 2 weeks. The cabin was quaint, with a large living room, a cozy fireplace, and a kitchen overlooking the lake. The kids were thrilled with the idea of spending their summer days swimming and fishing in the lake, while Mark and Sarah looked forward to peaceful evenings by the fire. Little did they know, their peaceful retreat would soon turn into a nightmare. The first few days were blissful. The Morgans explored the woods, had picnics by the lake, and enjoyed the beautiful sunsets. But on the 4th night, things began to change. Emily, who had been sleeping in the loft above the living room, woke up with a start. She could hear faint whispers echoing through the cabin. "Mom, Dad," she called out in a shaky voice. Sarah and Mark, startled from their sleep, rushed upstairs to check on their daughter. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Sarah asked. "I heard voices," Emily said, whispers coming from downstairs. Mark brushed it off as a dream and assured Emily that everything was fine. They went back to bed, but the sense of unease lingered in the air. The following night it happened again. This time, both Emily and Ethan were awakened by the eerie whispers. They crept downstairs to investigate, only to find the living room empty and the voices growing louder. "They're coming from outside," Ethan whispered. Mark and Sarah, now wide awake, joined their children in the living room. They stepped onto the porch and listened. The whispers seemed to emanate from the forest that bordered the lake. "They sound like chanting," Sarah said, her voice trembling as the Morgans strained to make out the words. The whispers transformed into a haunting, melodic chant. The words were unfamiliar, and the rhythm was unsettling. It was as though the forest itself was alive with a malevolent presence. Terrified, the family retreated inside the cabin and locked all the doors and windows. They spent a sleepless night trying to rationalize the strange occurrences. In the morning, Mark decided to investigate the source of the voices. Armed with a flashlight, he ventured into the woods, leaving his family behind in the safety of the cabin. The forest was dense, and the air grew colder as Mark delved deeper. After what felt like hours, he stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a weathered, ancient-looking tree with gnarled branches that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. As Mark approached the tree, he saw strange symbols etched into its bark. They glowed faintly in the dim light of his flashlight. The chanting grew louder, and Mark realized it was coming from the tree itself. Suddenly, a gust of wind howled through the clearing, extinguishing Mark's flashlight. He was enveloped in darkness, and the chanting intensified. Panicked, he stumbled backward and tripped over a root, falling to the ground. As Mark lay there, paralyzed with fear, he felt something cold and clammy wrap around his ankle. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The unseen force began to drag him toward the tree, and he clawed at the ground in desperation. Back at the cabin, Sarah, Emily, and Ethan anxiously awaited Mark's return. Hours passed, and there was no sign of him. The whispers continued to haunt the cabin, growing louder and more sinister. The family decided they couldn't wait any longer. Armed with flashlights and whatever makeshift weapons they could find, they set out into the forest to search for Mark. The woods seemed different now, foreboding and unnatural. They followed the faint sound of the chanting until they reached the same clearing where Mark had disappeared. They saw the gnarled tree, its branches writhing and twisting as if alive, and there, at its base, they found Mark, unconscious and pale. Heavy with clouds, a portent of the tempest soon to come. Captain Benjamin Wilkins stood at the helm of the ship Maelstrom, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was a seasoned sailor, known for his daring voyages and fearless pursuit of riches. But this time he had embarked on a journey unlike any other. The crew whispered tales of the Maelstrom, of how it was cursed, haunted by the souls of those who had perished aboard her. But Wilkins paid no heed to such superstitions. He was after a fabled treasure, said to be hidden beneath the unforgiving sea, and he would stop at nothing to claim it. As the ship sailed deeper into uncharted waters, a palpable unease settled over the crew. The weather had turned worse, and the wind howled like a vengeful spirit. Rain lashed at their faces, stinging like 1,000 tiny needles. "They say there be monsters lurking in these waters," muttered old Bill, the ship's grizzled veteran, "ancient creatures that'd make the devil himself tremble." Wilkins dismissed the old sailor's fears with a wave of his hand. Superstitions and fairy tales, Bill. We're after treasure, not ghost stories. Hours turned into days, and the tempest showed no signs of relenting. The crew grew weary, and their nerves frayed. Strange occurrences became commonplace whispers in the night, phantom footsteps on the deck, and eerie cries carried by the wind. Some claimed to have seen glowing eyes beneath the waves, but Wilkins dismissed their accounts as products of a fevered imagination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Maelstrom encountered an otherworldly phenomenon. The sea itself seemed to come alive, churning and frothing in a way that defied nature. Wilkins and his crew watched in stunned silence as a colossal, tentacled monstrosity emerged from the depths, its eyes glowing like smoldering embers. It was a kraken, a creature of legend, a nightmare-made flesh. Panic spread among the crew. As the kraken's tentacles encircled the ship, men screamed and prayed in equal measure. Cannons were fired, but the beast's hide was impenetrable. It was as if the ocean itself had risen to devour them. In the midst of the chaos, old Bill stepped forward, clutching an ancient amulet. "I've heard tales of this," he shouted above the tumult. "An amulet to appease the sea's wrath." Wilkins, desperate and with no other options, nodded his consent. Bill hurled the amulet into the foaming maw of the kraken. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, as if by a miracle, the kraken released its grip on the ship and sank back into the abyss. The sea calmed, and the tempest waned, leaving the Maelstrom battered but afloat. The crew stared at Bill in awe and gratitude, but he shook his head. "This be no ordinary amulet. It be cursed, as are we all now." Wilkins demanded an explanation, and Bill reluctantly obliged. The amulet be the key to the treasure we seek, but it comes at a terrible price. The sea demands blood in exchange for its secrets, and the curse shall haunt us until we've paid in full. The crew was divided. Some were ready to abandon the quest and return to safer waters, while others, lured by the promise of unimaginable riches, insisted on pressing forward. Wilkins, his ambition undiminished, sided with the latter. As the Maelstrom continued its perilous journey, the curse manifested itself in increasingly horrifying ways. Crew members vanished without a trace, their screams echoing through the night. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and ghostly apparitions haunted their dreams. Desperation gnawed at the edges of sanity, and mutiny hung in the air, but Wilkins pressed on, possessed by a feverish obsession with the treasure that lay hidden in the abyss. He knew that the amulet held the key, and he was willing to do whatever it took to unlock its secrets. One fateful night, as the ship drifted in still waters, a voice emerged from the darkness, an otherworldly, siren-like melody that called to the crew. Mesmerized, they followed the haunting tune, drawn to the edge of the ship. It was then that they saw her, a beautiful, ethereal figure with long, flowing hair, her eyes like burning coals. She beckoned to them, her voice an irresistible lure. Crew members, one by one, leaped into the sea, their faces twisted in rapturous ecstasy. Wilkins, his senses returning to him, realized the truth. The siren was a manifestation of the curse, a malevolent force that sought to claim their souls. He ordered the cannons to fire, but the siren's song grew louder, drowning out all reason. In a final act of defiance, Wilkins seized the cursed amulet from Bill's hands and hurled it into the sea. The siren's wail reached a deafening crescendo, and then, with a sound like thunder, she was gone, the curse broken. The Maelstrom limped back to civilization, battered and broken. The surviving crew members carried within the scars of their harrowing journey, both physical and mental. They had abandoned their quest for the cursed treasure, realizing that some secrets were better, left buried beneath the waves.